Welcome on into another edition of WRAL Triangle and Two. I'm Luis Fernandez. He's Mark Bergin. We are previewing the local ACC teams ahead of the college football season. Today, we are talking about the Duke Blue Devils. If you have not seen our episodes on UNC or NC State, be sure to check those out. WRALSportsFan.com, 99.9 The Fans YouTube page. Mark Bergin, a lot of change in Durham with Duke. Mike Elko heading to Texas A&M. Manny Diaz is the new head coach for the Blue Devils. That does not even begin to look at the different changes on the roster and stuff like that. So we are looking at the top storylines for Duke going into this college football season. We're going to do this draft style. Mark, what is your first choice? You were on the clock.
You spoil me, Lewis. And I'm going to go, what does year one look like with Manny Diaz?
Okay.
It's pretty simple. Can you build off the last 2 years of growth under Mike Elko? And these are just questions that I have. We can talk about the attributes that he brings, his familiarity with the ACC, given his previous coaching stops. The one that gets the most attention is when he was the head coach at Miami, which we'll discuss here in a second. But hopefully he can take some things that he learned when he was the defensive coordinator over at Penn State, bring them to this Duke program that has been on the up and up the last 2 years. When Mike Elko took over a program for David Cutcliffe, where Mike Elko took over a program that had lost 13 consecutive ACC games. Yep. So can you build on that? I mean, like, we saw College Game Day in Durham, and it wasn't for hoops, it was for the gridiron and football. Well, that's what I'm talking about, Lewis.
And when you look at last year, right, they were a 4th and long stop away from being undefeated, beating Clemson and Notre Dame in Durham.
In the same season, folks.
In Wallace Wade.
In the same season.
So this team had a lot of success last year, even if they trailed down the end because of injuries primarily.
Let's talk a little more about Manny Diaz. The image that I have in my brain, it was the final year he was coaching Miami. Opening game, Alabama. Bryce Young's coming out party, connects downfield to Jamison Williams and goes for a touchdown. And Manny Diaz is just pointing at someone on the screen. I don't know if it was his own player. I don't know if it was the referee. He clearly wasn't happy with the result and the outcome of that game. Like, that is, okay, when I think of Manny Diaz, that's what I think of, for better or for worse. And I know that he has a lot more coaching experience than that. But that's just the image that I have seared into my brain going into this year. And again, like, even for me, like, 6 wins in a bowl appearance is a success again, just considering you have a new regime and a new head coach, and you try to maintain what you've built the last few years with Mike Elko, who, now got a higher profile job over with the Texas A&M Aggies.
Sure. Okay. So your first storyline is just Manny Diaz's first
year one. What does that look like?
I'll kind of piggyback off that a little bit. One storyline that I will be watching for Duke this year is how they handle their schedule. And what I mean by that is, last year, wow, that schedule was tough. You look at the teams that they had to play, whether it be Clemson, Notre Dame, UNC, NC State. They had like a really difficult row there. They were at Louisville. They played at Florida State. Like, they had a really tough sledding there of games. Their schedule is kind of similar this year, where they just have a very difficult back half of the season. I could very realistically see Duke starting the season 4-0, right? With the teams that they're playing. They're playing Elon, Northwestern, at Northwestern. You've got UConn. There's another team in there that I'm forgetting, but they have a lot of early success, get a chance to grow into this team, but the back half of their schedule, you look at, like, they open ACC play home against UNC. That's always a tricky one. Rivalries at Georgia Tech, a team that they lost to the last time they played them, versus FSU, highest ranked ACC team in the preseason AP Top 25 poll, versus SMU, a team that a lot of people say could be a dark horse, no pun intended, team to make it to the ACC championship game the first year they are in conference.
I got your back. First 4 games, we were like, what are you talking about, Luis Fernandez? Duke going 4-0 to start the season in football. You're spot on, though. Elon, Northwestern, 2 Friday games. Hopefully that doesn't
Weird.
goof
They
up the
also
routine.
play FSU on a Friday.
UConn and Middle Tennessee to start.
Middle
the
Tennessee
season.
at Middle Tennessee State.
So it's like those are all winnable games.
Yeah.
If let me put it this way, if Mike Elko were still here, Duke's 4-0. I'm penciling in the W's.
So I think, and that's going to be interesting just to kind of see how they grow over those first 4 games. I'm sure at Northwestern is going to be tricky just because it's a Friday night game on the road. But then they finish up that schedule with they are at Miami. So Manny Diaz kind of homecoming. Also at MTSU, another place that Manny Diaz coached. So a lot of Manny Diaz games this season.
He coached at State too.
Yeah,
so
then at NC State, and then versus Virginia Tech. So their back half of their schedule is very challenging. So how does Duke continue to grow into these tough schedules? Second year in a row now where they've had just a really tough slate.
My second pick.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we know that Maalik Murphy is quarterback 1.
Yep.
Can he bring some of that, what I'll call Texas swag, to Durham? And this is a player who knew Manny Diaz from the recruiting circuits down in Florida, and they're training together at a passing league camp. And can he bring just a dynamic element to the offense where a year ago Grayson Loftus has to step in, and he wasn't expected to play at all last year. And I thought he did a nice job. And I thought he did a nice job given the circumstances with injuries to Riley Leonard and the backup as well. And so Murphy wins the quarterback competition. That didn't surprise me given his connection with Manny Diaz. But what does he look like? Can he bring some of that pedigree that you would expect from a caliber of recruit that he is, in the fact that he was at Texas? Ewers is coming back at Texas. Arch Manning's also on that roster.
Who's Arch Manning on there?
Exactly. But my point, Lewis, is he was never going to see the field in Austin. Yeah. So he now gets his opportunity in Durham. Can he make the most of that? Given, I mean, you get a scholarship offer to Texas, Lewis. Like, come on now.
Well, and so I'll throw this out there to kind of complement that, right? Mm-hmm. The offense that Duke will be running moving forward with Jonathan Brewer. Think about what SMU has done over the past couple of seasons. It's been up tempo. It's been very multiple, so that you are able to execute simple plays, formations, designs out of similar formations. So you're keeping the defense on its toes. And quarterbacks have had a lot of success in this system. Maalik Murphy even went as far as say it's part of the reason why, he was so interested in this situation. It's part of the reason why Manny Diaz thinks that they're going to be able to bring good quarterbacks to Duke moving forward, is because this offense is very nice to quarterbacks. Over the past 2 seasons, the 2 SMU starting quarterbacks, Tanner Mordecai and Preston Stone, I believe, they averaged about 3,300 yards passing and about 30 touchdowns. Okay.
Strike up the band.
In 2 seasons. The last time someone threw 3,000 yards at Duke was back in,
wait for it.
I think I want to say 2012, I want to say.
Okay.
I just wrote this down. Now it's escaping me. And then no quarterback at Duke has ever thrown for 30 passing touchdowns. So I'm not saying that Maalik
in
Murphy,
a single season.
So I'm not saying Maalik Murphy is going to come out here and 5,000 yards, Heisman, all that stuff. No. Manny Diaz has even talked about reining in expectations and not telling him not to put on the cape. You don't have to be Superman. But what I'm saying is that you're going to see offensive numbers with Duke football this year. Maalik Murphy could be a prime beneficiary of that.
Do you want to go to your second pick?
Sure. Yeah. I'll keep the offensive rhythm going here.
Okay.
The Duke weapons are very good. Jordan Moore.
It pains him to say that, folks.
No,
he's a UNC alum.
Listen,
he's a UNC alum.
Jordan Moore is a Blitnikoff Award watch list, second all-team ACC last year.
I got to hype my boy for a second because you're too humble to do this. You're reporting on him going into this year.
Oh, Jordan Moore?
Yes. Over on WRLSportsFan.com. Take this. Go check that out if you haven't already, about what to expect from him going into this year.
It's almost like the fun fact about Jordan Moore, right? Like, when you have you're at a work party or you're meeting new people and you have an icebreakers type situation, his icebreaker would be, oh, I used to play quarterback. It's like his fun fact that people put out there. And so he used to play quarterback. This is his third season now playing wide receiver. He's talked about how he feels like it's really starting to make sense to him. His very first year playing quarterback, he was one of the better players at wide receiver. He was one of the better wide receivers in the ACC. Like he is a natural for the position. I think that his quarterbacking experience has helped him kind of be on the same page as quarterbacks. He's very good. He's very talented. You've got, Samir Higgins, you've got Eli Pankel. Like, you've got a really talented group of wide receivers at Duke. Jaquez Moore at running back. And the name I want everyone to keep an eye out for, Nicky Dalmolin, the tight end for the Blue Devils. He, almost just ended his time playing football. Like, he's a grad student. He was kind of like, all right, I'm just going to move on. Ultimately decided to come back, seeing how things were going this offseason. And he is a name that is brought up all the time at practice by players, by coaches. He's going to be a huge beneficiary of this offense, I think. Watch the tight ends and Nicky Dalmolin in general for the Blue Devils.
It's August, so I'm going to timestamp this, and then as soon as he lights it up this year, where it's like Lewis tried to tell you, folks.
I'm letting you know right now. Okay, so that is my second pick.
Yeah,
Mark, what's your third pick?
The foundation of how this Duke Blue Devils team achieved success. It wasn't Riley Leonard. It wasn't Jordan Waters, who's now transferred. It's the line. It's the lineman.
Graham Barton's starting for the Buccaneers. Do you see that?
He's a first-round pick.
Yeah.
You have to replace him. You replace Jacob Monk, who's also selected. You have to replace Dwayne Carter, also drafted, a 3-time captain. The guy who, when you go to the ACC kickoff, it's just like, oh, here's this player. Dwayne Carter's there last several years. Yeah. So those players who built the foundation of what Duke football was starting to emerge to be and what it still can be. Mm-hmm. It's why Mike Elko has a new job.
Those
right?
line of scrimmage players.
It's the line of scrimmage game too. So how you achieve success the last few years is you played ball control football, you dominate the line of scrimmage, and you win the turnover battle. It's not flashy. It's not, in fantasy football, you're going to light up the scoreboard, but it's how games are won and lost, particularly in the ACC when you see a lot of close battles. Replacing those players and some other players who have transferred as well, but those 3 who are all on NFL teams, NFL draft picks, how you replace them, that's something where it's going to be really, really tough to do that, Lewis.
So what's interesting about the line in general for Duke, right? Offensive and defensive. In the spring, they were barely able to do live reps because I think it was less than 10 offensive linemen, maybe even less than that. Like they barely had any offensive linemen on the team. And then they added a bunch through the transfer portals, through freshmen coming in, in the summer and in the fall. So, they really were not able to practice that much. That impacted both the offensive line as well as the defensive line. So for fall camp, that has been a huge emphasis on them, is developing those live action reps early and often. So how will that translate overall? I think you're spot on. It's all about the line of scrimmage for Duke. Yeah. That's what has made them so good. And I think that's going to be a huge reason why, if they have success this year, it's because of that.
Let's go to your third pick.
Sure. I'm going to kind of circle back to Manny Diaz a little bit. His defense. Manny Diaz is one of the best defensive coaches in the country. He's had a lot of success defensively at the different places he's gone. He's been a defensive coordinator at a lot of different places. So how does that defense translate at Duke? That's going to be one of my big storylines to watch for Duke this year, kind of rounding this out. That defense is going to be huge.
Is there a player or even just a position group that you're looking at? I mean, we just spent some time on the line, but is there a player defensively we should keep an eye out for the Blue Devils?
Trey Freeman at linebacker. I think he's going to kind of inherit that, defensive, captain type role, essentially, like being like one of these stars of this team. In Manny Diaz defenses, the way the scheme tends to work is the defensive ends have a lot of opportunity to create havoc. It is almost like, it is designed for them to have success. At Penn State last year, you looked at the team that I believe led the country in sacks, led the country in, I want to say tackles for loss, or was near the top, and also was one of the best rush stopping teams in the country.
Flying to the ball and winning that battle up front. Lewis. So that's what that tells me.
Exactly. So I look at like, Wes Williams, Ryan Smith. There are a few of those players that I think have the opportunity to make a name for themselves in this defense this year. So, how havoc causing is this defense? And when I say havoc, I don't mean just like causing chaos. I mean like literally like havoc, as in sacks, tackles for loss, passes deflected, those type of stats that are measured all in that one encompassing kind of notion.
Before we get to our recap, I've got another honorable mention.
Let me hear it.
The House of Feely, another one of your reports. The Duke strength and conditioning coach, Manny Diaz goes to the ACC kickoff and he talks about trying to build on that continuity from a year ago. And you've got your strengthening and conditioning coach who is beloved by the players.
They adore him. David Feely. He is like, it was so the whole reason why I even did that story is that when you go to availabilities, you go to practice, like his name is brought up just without you even
the first time I'm like, who are we talking?
It'll be like, hey, it's like, hey, how you doing? Hey, do you have your Dave Feely? Like just like randomly. So, strength coaches are like people, it's a cliche being like, oh man, the strength coach is so great. But like a big reason, even going back to the Elko days, because Feely's been there, this is going to be his third season. Feely and his staff have been there for quite some time and have played a big role in why Duke has been able to turn into, you talked about the line of scrimmage, the defensive oriented, the running the ball,
getting players drafted, getting players drafted.
Like, the Graham Barton, who was starting offensive lineman for Duke.
He was a left tackle at Duke. He's going to play center in the NFL.
Starting center for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They announced that earlier this week. Which is kind of expected, like where he would be moving. He fits that role very well. He was the first round pick for Duke since 2019, I want to say. And so the work that their strength conditioning staff has done, and it's not something that's just like, oh, wow, okay, fun fact. But like it's something I think that really makes a difference, especially when you're talking about a transitional time going from Elko to Diaz. I think that really benefits Duke and helps them with consistency going into this first year.
I was going to use the word continuity, but yeah,
exactly.
We're in each other's brains. Let's do the recap. Yep. Year one with Manny Diaz.
My first one was, what was my first one? Tough schedule. Duke's tough schedule, especially in the back half of the ACC.
Easier start to the season. So again, first 4 games, all very winnable. All very winnable. Maalik Murphy, now that he's won the quarterback battle, what does that look like? Because Riley Leonard, I know he's at Notre Dame now, was beloved at that quarterback position for the Blue Devils. But Maalik Murphy, QB1, again, the Texas swag. If you're a quarterback at Texas, and he got some playing time there, but he's not going to play behind Ewers and Arch Manning, can he bring that playmaking ability to Durham?
One thing I'll say about Maalik Murphy as we recap, his deep ball accuracy is ultimately what elevated him into this position. The way he's able to throw the ball deep downfield with touch. He's like 6'5", like 230. He's got a rocket of an arm. And so he's not just someone who's going to throw the ball deep. He's going to throw the ball accurately deep. And so that's something to keep an eye out for him as well. The players he's throwing the balls to, that was my next point. The wide receiver core for Duke, Jordan Moore, Eli Pankel, Samir Higgins, all of them. Jaquez Moore at running back. I said Nicky Delmullen. He's a tight end you're really going to want to watch for. He's going to be a big recipient of passes for this Duke offense.
And the last 2, LOS, line of scrimmage game, how you replace key linemen from a year ago, the Graham Bartons of the world, Jacob Monk, Dwayne Carter up front. And then Manny Diaz's defense as well.
Havoc causing, last year at Penn State, they led the country in sacks. I want to see tackles for loss as well. One of the best rush stopping defenses in the country. So how does all of that translate to Durham?
Yeah. Another edition of WRAL Triangle and Two. Luis Fernandez, I'm Mark Bergin. If you haven't checked out our preseason previews, top storylines for both NC State and UNC, check that out over on the 99.9 The Fan YouTube page.